Welcome to the Hollywood Reporters Behind the Screen. I'm Carolyn Jardina, and in this episode, we're talking with Oscar-winning re-recording mixer Paul Massey, whose work on No Time to Die earned him his 10th Academy Award nomination. Paul is also set to receive the Cinema Audio Society's highest honor, the Career Achievement Award, during the 58th Cinema Audio Society Awards on March 19th. Paul won an Oscar, BAFTA, and CAS award for Bohemian Rhapsody, as well as BAFTA and CAS awards for Walk the Line and Master and Commander: The Far Side of the World. He received an additional CAS award for Ford vs. Ferrari and an additional BAFTA for Almost Famous. Massey, who has enjoyed a long-time collaboration with directors including Ridley Scott and James Mangold, was born near Pinewood Studios in London, studied music at the Royal Academy of Music, and played in various bands and orchestras before beginning his career in sound. He has also recorded and mixed albums as well as live tours for bands such as Yes and Supertramp. In this conversation, which was recorded on February 5th, I talked with Paul about No Time to Die, and joined by some of his colleagues and friends, we chatted about his career. You can also hear Paul discuss his work on Bohemian Rhapsody in a February 24th, 2019 episode of Behind the Screen, and Ford vs. Ferrari in an episode from November 15th, 2019. Hi, Paul. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Carolyn.
So you have such a wide range of films that you've worked on, but what did it mean to you to do your first Bond film?
Oh, it meant the world to me. I was born in England, as you just mentioned, and I think the King franchise for anyone living in England has got to be Bond. It's obviously the longest standing, and it's just part of the heritage and part of the history of growing up in the UK. So for me to be asked was a massive honor, and I just leapt at the chance. It was great.
How did you come onto the project?
I was asked by Oliver Tarney, who was the sound supervisor on the film. Oliver and I have done several films together in the past, and he and Mike Solinger had been talking about who to bring onto the project for re-recording. Mike was the associate producer and post-supervisor for No Time to Die. And between the two of them, they thought I would fit, and I got a call and happily said yes. That was it.
Well, let's talk about the film. The first action sequence is the one that takes place in Italy. And we have the car chase around the village, and then the sequence in the square where the sounds of the bullet striking the Aston Martin really told the audience that the clock was ticking on how much longer they would be safe, really adding to the tension. Would you tell us about the mix on that scene?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. That's one of my favorite scenes from the film. The build-up emotionally into that scene has Bond questioning Madeleine's loyalty to him and his love for her love for him. Not only is there a lot of action going on, but there's a lot of emotion going on between the two of them inside the car. And apart from just being an epic Aston Martin car chase through wonderfully colorful streets, in Italy, when they do finally get sideswiped, T-boned there, and they come to a stop inside Donut Square, as we came to call it, there's a lot of mistrust between the two of them inside the car, as well as the threat of the villains on the outside firing at them, trying to get them killed. So it takes a while there for Bond to really come to grips with what he's supposed to be doing in terms of getting out of there and saving their lives. He knows that the glass is going to be holding for a while, but Oliver and his team did a wonderful job with the sound effects and Mark Taylor mixing them. So you get the threat of the bullets on the outside and the guns going off with full impact. You get the idea that the glass is withholding and will withhold for quite a long time. But slowly, as they're shooting at the same spot on the glass, it's going to give way eventually, and they're going to die. So not only do you get the full impacts of the violence from outside of the car, but inside the car, Mark Taylor did a fantastic job of mixing in a 360-degree environment, utilizing Atmos, where you could hear the dull thuds of the impacts of the bullet on the glass from the interior perspective, but you could also pick up the real threat, which was that the shards of glass were starting to fall and break, and they were really in imminent danger. So by the time Bond looks at Madeleine and says, okay, we're going to get out of here, and takes off and starts spinning the car around and shooting from the headlights, we've already had a really amazing auditory experience from inside that car's perspective. And then, of course, it just takes off and we're into a full-on, victory moment for Bond, where he's stopping the villains, he's getting away, and then he puts Madeleine on the train to say goodbye. It's a wonderful sequence. Visually, the direction on it, the acting, and some great opportunities for sound. It was really great.
How much of the production sound did you use?
Quite a lot, actually. Simon Hayes did an amazing job of recording as much detail as he could, atmospheres as well as on-location impacts and such like that. So there was quite a lot used, but of course it was enhanced drastically by Oliver and James and their teams. James Harrison was the co-supervisor. But they did an amazing job recording the cars. They had a couple of days, I believe, to record the Aston Martins, and of course all of the guns and everything. Anything that they needed was provided by Eon and Michael Wilson and Barbara Broccoli. They were very, very good in allowing as much recording time as was necessary to assemble a vast library.
Now, another thrilling sequence was the one when Bond and Felix are in the sailboat as it's sinking. And that was shot on the soundstage at Pinewood, as I understand it.
Yes, I believe it was shot there.
In the underwater tank.
In the underwater tank, yeah. Well, that was a huge challenge. Simon, again, did a wonderful job recording the production dialogue, but obviously it had noise on it. There was a lot of bubbles coming up from the water. There was a lot of creaking and ronking from the gimbal or whatever they were using there. Fortunately, Carrie, our director, said he wanted that environment to start off very loud and very noisy. And there was a lot of emphasis put on the ship creaking and rolling and metal strains, as well as all of the water obviously rushing in and taking up the space. As the scene progressed, though, we needed to become more emotional as Felix was dying. And as Bond realized that he was losing one of his best friends, the atmospheres and all of that effects environment needed to back off somewhat. And so we had to rely on dialogue. And unfortunately, we managed to clean it up enough that I think we only used a couple of words of ADR in the whole thing. The rest was all production dialogue. And then as the effects were retreating, Felix was dying, the music was coming up with the emotion as well from Hans Zimmer. And so at that moment, the three elements of dialogue, music, and effects were all sort of equal, and then the emotion took off. It was a great sequence, though, and Carrie wanted it to be very, very alive, very dynamic, very noisy. I mean, one of his instructions to us was that, the engine rooms on those trawlers are incredibly noisy. And so even though we lose the engine quite quickly because the water was rushing in, he wanted that environment to be very real at the beginning of that scene. It was quite a challenge. And then, again, very similar to Donut Square, where Bond had to make the decision emotionally as well as physically to get out of there and save their lives. Bond had to make the decision to finally let his friend Felix go. And there was that emotion, a lot of it shown through the score. And then, of course, he had to save his life. He had to get out of there as quickly as he possibly could. So that was a very challenging sequence. I would say, actually, you've picked up on the two very, very challenging sequences of the whole film.
Well, you've used the word emotion a few times, and and this film, obviously, in addition to all of the action, is incredibly emotional. Would you talk about just how you balanced action and emotion, and maybe what were some of the challenges to some of the quieter scenes?
Yeah, I mean, clearly there was a lot of action sequences throughout the film, like the car chase in Norway with helicopters and all of the rest, and so. In a way, those kind of look after themselves because it's kind of expected as to how those should sound. You're going to need the reality. You're going to need the adrenaline. You're going to need the music. And so Mark and I went through and tried to organize those scenes so that they weren't just flat, but the effects were leading where they needed to lead, and music was leading where it needed to lead, etc. But one of the things we discussed at length throughout the whole film was that we did not want it to become overwhelming to an audience, just in terms of intensity and level. So we were trying to vary colors within quiet scenes as well. It was very important for us to get the shape and an arc of the film, so that the quiet scenes really allowed the dialogue and the emotion of the dialogue, or whatever had to be portrayed during those scenes, to live, but not live in a flat way. We were constantly trying to change backgrounds and perspectives on dialogue and reverbs and things like that, so that hopefully in subtle ways that hopefully the audience doesn't even notice, those scenes don't become flat and boring and simply a layer of air and dialogue. I mean, we didn't want that to happen. But we were trying to very carefully maintain that arc throughout the film, so that it wasn't a roller coaster ride, but it also had relief in the quiet scenes from the intensity of some of the bullet-filled car chase sequences. And sometimes those quieter scenes can be much more difficult than the full-on action sequences.
Right.
We're also, trying to be very conscious of overall level, even when we got into the loud sequences, so that they didn't just become a barrage of, harsh sounding bullets or something on the audience. We're trying to maintain some sort of discipline there.
I have to say, it was great to be able to see it in a theater again.
Oh yeah, this film definitely needs to be seen in a theater. I mean, okay, it's all right on TV if you have to watch it at home, but it's a theatrical film for sure.
What was the collaborative process like with your director, Kari Fukunaga?
He was great. He's very into sound. He was very particular about sound. Some of the sequences, for instance, the Jamaican nightclub where Bond goes to meet Felix. I could never get that band loud enough for him. He told me I need to get out more to get to some clubs, but I just physically couldn't even get it louder. One of the great things there, though, and in terms of getting back to Carrie, he knew that the actors needed to be projecting during that sequence. There was going to be a lot of loud music finally inserted into the scene when we were mixing it. He knew that obviously ahead of time. And so he played fairly loud music on set, so that all of the characters did actually shout a little bit over the music and project. And then we were able to get a lot of that music out. I think actually what Simon described was that he used more of a thud track. So they had the beat and they had level within the room, but it didn't have a lot of high frequency percussion or guitars or anything like that within their production dialogue, which was very smart. Because when we got to the final, I was able to subdue that simply because it was low end thuds. And the actors were still projecting beyond the level of the music when they were filming. And then I was able to get the music in, obviously with a lot of club beat in there anyway, a lot of thuds and low end and low frequency information in the music, and get that up very, very close to the dialogue. And this was all due to Carrie having the foresight to make sure that Daniel and the others were projecting while they were filming, which was great. It was really wonderful. So Carrie had that kind of detail in mind. And throughout the final mix, he would allow us to come up with the mixes that we wanted and wanted to present to him. And then he would riff off of those and have his ideas of how we should take it further. It was really a very comfortable collaboration, I have to say, between all of us.
And would you like to also talk about not just the collaboration with the director, but with the rest of the sound team and even the editors, Tom Cross and Elliot Graham, the whole team?
Yeah, no, it felt like, it sounds ridiculous because it was obviously a big budget film, but it felt like a very, in many ways, a small family film being put together, because that's just the way the whole crew in post was working together. We actually didn't have very much time to final this, even though it sat on the shelf for, I guess, about a year and a half. But we were initially rushing to the deadline of the initial release prior to the pandemic, and we had 3 weeks to final mix this. So what that meant was that we had to work together as a team very quickly enhancing every part of what everyone else was doing. And in many ways, that was very beneficial to the film, I think, because when you're working together like that, you don't have the opportunity to go, oh, it's sort of okay, we'll come back to it later on. It was like, no, if we have an issue here, we have a problem or a way to deal with the soundtrack or editorially, we need to sort that out right now. And we need to move on. We need to make a decision and come to a conclusion and work together very quickly to get us, to what was the end result. And in many ways, that also is great, I feel, because it doesn't allow you to go back and deal with all the minutiae that sometimes I feel a lot of films that have time on their side get to a point in the soundtrack and then they kind of destroy it a little bit because they manage to go back in microscopically and make changes. I don't think that always helps the end product. I think sometimes your initial gut feeling about a scene or a sequence or a cue and the way you assemble it and mix it comes out with a much better, more vivid, lively end soundtrack. And I think we were all just working together in that way. I mean, I've worked with Tom and Elliot individually, not as a dual editing team. I've worked with them individually in the past on other films. And they're both wonderful. They both have slightly different styles, obviously. And they worked very, very well together on this. But again, because of the quantity of material they had to get through and the visual effects and all the rest, and the constant updating of the edit while we were mixing, it was just another sort of facet of how we were working together as a team. And, we would put something together and assemble it on the final mix stage at Goldcrest. And then they would come in and review, and then Carrie would come in and review. And we would all know that we were working to a goal that had to be achieved pretty quickly. And so, we had no choice but to work together well. And we did very, very well. It was great. And then Oliver Tani and James Harrison and their team, as I mentioned before, I'd worked with them before many times. The dialogue editorial team with Becky Ponting, Hans Zimmer and his team I'm very familiar with, and they were wonderful as well. Mark Taylor, I've mixed with several films with him now. So it was all very familiar. Everyone knew what to expect from each other, which is a fantastic feeling. And it really, really did feel like a sort of a small family film that we were putting together on a massive scale. That sounds so contradictory, but it was true. It was great.
We can't talk about this film without talking about the ending. Would you tell us about mixing that?
Yeah, well, for an awful long time, we actually didn't even see the final shot. We were told what was going to happen. But, obviously it was a very closely guarded secret, and they certainly couldn't get out to the public what was going to happen. I mean, this being Daniel Craig's final outing as Bond, I think that's probably why I've mentioned emotion so many times, because it was an emotional film.
Yes.
Certainly for him. And that whole last sequence, once he realizes that he doesn't have time to get off of the island, and spoiler alert, as I hope everyone knows now, he doesn't get off the island, and he's ordered the missile attack on the island, and he knows that he's going to have to just stay there. And he already knew, obviously, that the young girl was his daughter with Madeleine, and he knew he had to get them to safety. And the conversation that he and Madeleine have on the walkie-talkie right at the very end, right before the missiles hit the island, is extremely emotional. And you, as an audience member, you want to know, you want that conclusion, you want to know that was the young girl was his daughter, and you want to know about the conflict that was going on inside his head about having to stay on the island, and his love for Madeleine and his new family. And yet you also know that he knew a long time ago, many, many scenes ago, that he probably wasn't going to get off the island. And he knew about his new family situation and his love for Madeleine. So all of those things combined, when you get to the very, very end, along with Hans's score, which was absolutely incredible during that sequence. It's a very, very, very slow build. And it has the threat of the missiles within it, and it has the love and the emotion between the two characters within it. And it has the sort of coming to grips with the reality that Bond wasn't going to make it from Q and the Home Office in London's perspective, all of those things are all put together in that one sequence. They realize they're going to lose him. Bond confesses his love for Madeleine and his daughter. He knew he had to stay there. He's made the decision selflessly to stay there. And Hans's score, this whole scene took obviously a long time to mix, and it had to be a very, very, very slow ramp up to that final conclusion. And I think he totally nailed it. And I had a lot of fun trying to get that ramp to the point where it was emotional, not overwhelming, but fulfilling and large enough when the missiles hit and the shock of the fact that Bond just died. So it took several runs at that, I have to say, trying to decide where the arc, where the ramp should be within the score to deliver what we needed, and not to peak too early, but to get there at the end. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to mix, and very, very fulfilling by the time it was finished. And again, I think Hans just nailed it, and Daniel really nailed it with his acting as well. You know, this was his version of Bond coming to a conclusion after so many films, and I think he really portrayed that along with Carrie's direction.
Well, in recognition of your Career Achievement Award, I'd like to talk about your career as well. And I brought a few of your friends along to help with this conversation.
Oh my gosh, hi. I hope I didn't say anything rude.
I haven't known you to do that yet, so I don't think so.
That's not fair, Carolyn.
Rise.
Hello, Paul.
So for our listeners, we have re-recording mixer Andy Nelson, film editor Michael McCusker, and supervising sound editor and re-recording mixer David Giamarco joining us.
Thank you, guys. Wow, that was a huge surprise.
Happy birthday. Oh, no.
Paul, would you like to start by telling us a little bit about your music career? And I think there are some questions that they would like to ask as well about that, working with some of the bands.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, I started off, I started my whole career starting off in music recording and engineering at a music studio. Albums, demos, scores, whatever was necessary to record. It was great fun. I was, 18, 19. And then I got an opportunity to work with a concert tour company, Concert Productions International in Toronto. They had a contract with a pay-per-view in the States to record and produce live concert shows for various bands, big world-class bands. And I was hired to join the tour for a few venues or a few weeks with each one of these bands and record their concerts, mainly in stadiums, from trucks buried in the bellies of these stadiums, and then progress further as the cut was brought together for the concert films. I would then do the music mixes and the post-production on them as well. So it was a great opportunity to be involved throughout the entire process for each one of these concerts. And so I spent a lot of time with Yes. I recorded Supertramp's what was going to be their last tour in Toronto, and I managed to get one recording with the band in Vancouver, and the Police Synchronicity concert, and several others, Emmylou Harris, Chris de Burgh. It was really a great time for me. And it was really my introduction into putting sound together with picture, which I'd never done before, because everything up to that point for me had just been recording and mixing sound. So it was the first time that I started to understand the language of how, what does the picture editor do, and how do they speak, and what do they mean when they're talking about different techniques and dissolves. What is a dissolve? I've no idea. You know, all of those things. I started to get an opportunity to be introduced into those, and from that, I sort of did a natural drift into film, and I had an opportunity to go to Deluxe in Toronto and start working there as a film re-recording mixer, which is where I met Andy.
Met Andy.
Yeah, and when Andy moved to LA, then Andy.
You were on the next plane, I believe, right after me.
Andy very nicely recommended me, and some very foolish people decided to hire me, and I moved to LA. And that was basically how I just none of this was planned at all. It was just a great big drift, to be honest.
Is it ever? Is it ever? Paul, I've got one question for you. I was thinking as you were saying that, you know, when we started on film mixing, and you know, way back when we worked together in Toronto, you know, obviously we were on 6-track mag in those days. Do you think now, it's interesting hearing you talk about the music, because do you think now it's kind of gone full circle, because with Pro Tools and the track availability, you're back to sometimes mixing music as if you were back in a music studio, where we could never do that on film in the same way. And I wonder if that's something that's, you know, do you find you just use all those techniques from all those years ago when you're in this sort of world that we're in now?
Yeah, definitely, Andy. I mean, I'm very grateful for that experience that I had with, you know, recording and mixing 24-track with these bands. And that was a very big part of me going into Bohemian Rhapsody with Queen. Obviously, we were utilizing all of their 24 tracks, and I was able to draw on that experience of, you know, what it sounded like inside a stadium. And but you're very correct. Now we can have 24, 48, 96 tracks. It doesn't matter. It's limitless almost on Pro Tools. Yeah. Sometimes, though, I find that the discipline of having a restricted amount of tracks is beneficial. I don't know about how you feel about that.
Well, I mean, I didn't come through the same background as you, so I've always worked more in film and had that sort of limited access, if you like, to a degree. But I know what you mean. Sometimes too many choices, you know, you sometimes work better with the limited choice you have and be creative with it, so I think, than maybe just opening up a big can of worms, which can happen, as we know, with when you go back to sort of square one. So I agree with you. If you've got a really good...
I've never seen that happen. Just that's never happened.
Exactly.
Well, you've never seen a can of worms?
Never seen that. That's never happened to you, Paul. Has it really?
But no, it's interesting, because it's if you've got a combination of somebody who's really captured the music well and handed it to you, in some ways, you're right. It's you know, a lot of those searching moments are gone, and you can just focus on the task in hand.
Yeah, agreed, 100%. But you know, then again, Pro Tools does have a lot of advantages that we didn't used to have in terms of head alignment and all of that.
Oh yeah,
and undos.
Yes, there was none of that. 24-track tape, you punched and that was it.
Right,
it was.
Do you miss the road, Paul? The groupies, the parties. Do you miss it?
Not anymore, Mike. No. It actually wasn't as fun as you might think.
Oh, God.
I bet it was.
You're letting me down.
Sorry. But, you know, when you're in your 20s, it was a great time to be doing that.
Mm-hmm.
At my slightly older than 30 age now, I would, I don't think I'd want to do that again.
Mike, you also had a memory from when the two of you were working on Walk the Line.
Oh, well, that was my first movie. So I, you know, I wasn't a complete foreigner to the mixing stage, but I wasn't in a chair that had a voice. You know, I was assistant for many years. So I kind of came in for the final run and watched, and that was it. So I arrived on the stage with a lot of ideas, but not really having the confidence, nor I think actually the lexicon to speak them. And I think that I was extremely lucky to run into Paul Massey, because he just handled the situation and me and my sort of greenness in such a graceful way. I mean, he didn't, in a different scenario with different people, I think I would have felt intimidated. I don't think I would have been able to give my input. And Paul made me feel incredibly comfortable. And he recognized, and I was lucky about this, he recognized that I did have a voice and I did have a creative voice, and I just didn't know exactly how to speak it. So he solicited and wanted to know, and allowed me to just kind of express myself in the best way I knew how. So when he said earlier, you know, what a picture editor says, and what a picture editor, how they speak, and what's on their mind. Well, I was new to a picture editor, and I was new to the mixing stage, and I just the best I could do was to speak of the emotion of the scenes and the movie and what we were trying to achieve, and he listened, and he executed and incorporated, and really made me feel like I was a part of the process of my first movie. And I know that after that experience, sitting with him, literally sitting at the console with him and asking questions and learning, you know, what terminology is, he helped me to improve over the years and become more of a voice, and be able to express myself. And I thank God he was the first mixer I worked with. I thank God for that moment. I thank God for the fact that I get to work with him often. We've done 7 movies together, and we're going to head into an 8th. So I just really excited for you. It's about time. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mike. That's very kind of you to say. I should also add that you were far taller than me, so I was quite intimidated.
First time I've heard that.
David, you've also done a lot of movies together.
Yeah, we have. And I'm very, very fortunate to be able to sit beside you, Paul, and work with you and watch you. And I love watching you. And you're wondering who's looking over your shoulder all the time. But so I get to watch you. I get to ask you questions. And I'm in this incredible place. And you're always giving and always telling us what you're doing. And what would you tell young mixers out there who want to do and be where you are and get to where you are? And how do they, like, your music background has been so incredible in what you do now today, and what kind of things would you tell somebody coming up and where they should go and what they should look for?
Well, thank you, Dave, first of all. And I'm very privileged to sit next to you for so many years. We've done so many films together, and it's been a truly wonderful experience for me. So I'd like to add that. What do you tell young people trying to get into our industry? I mean, the industry is changing so quickly, but it's always changed so quickly, and it's evolved so many times. Andy mentioned earlier about, when we were back on MAG, there were also a lot of houses that were working off of synchronized tape. And we evolved through various picture editorial machines, computers, like Lightworks and Avid and such. And now we're on Pro Tools, and it'll change again. And so I think it's constantly evolving. I think any advice I would give to someone who wants to get into it is just to follow your passion, whatever it is that you would like to get into. If you're interested in sound, you could probably apply that to many different avenues. Maybe you prefer to be in theater. Maybe you'd like to be on a concert tour. Maybe you would like to be dealing with music. Maybe you'd like to be recording sound effects. Maybe you'd like to be editing. But whatever your passion is, I think follow that passion, take that lead, get as much experience as you can, be it in local community theater or in high school or in college. Whatever it is, any opportunity that you can get to be alongside others who know what they're doing and that you can learn from, and explore as many avenues as you can, because something will come up that you might not even be aware was a job. And I think it's more important to be passionate and happy about getting out for work every day than it is trying to achieve a position that you might not be happy to doing. other than that, how you get into the industry is a very tricky question. I'm not quite sure now. We used to have a lot of opportunity for people to be interning on the stage, to be, mixing Foley footsteps alongside the effects mixer, for instance. Those things just don't happen anymore. And so trying to get real valuable mix experience, you have to be very, what's the word? You've just got to fight to get into whatever you can, to get the experience that you need to get, and then hopefully some avenue, someone will see you in the right place at the right time and offer you the next position, which can lead to the next position. But again, always follow your passion.
You've done a lot of movies together. Do you want to pick one of the more memorable ones and share a little bit about it?
I mean, with Dave, clearly, Ford versus Ferrari, and with Mike, Greatest Showman. With Andy, Andy.
It was Norman Jewison, wasn't it?
Norman Jewison, and
yeah.
But even with like Moulin Rouge, where you were obviously mixing Moulin Rouge, but I think I just helped out for a couple of days with some second stage work, and that was great fun as well.
Yeah. That was a terrific experience. That was so complex. One thing that a lot of people don't know about Paul is, as brilliant as a mixer he is, he's also a really brilliant sailor. And when we worked together in Toronto, he had a sailboat, and we actually had some end of mix rap parties on that boat. And I think that was even more fun than mixing the movies. Taking the drift on Lake Ontario. Sorry. And I was thinking, with mobile stages and things now, people working from home, you ever thought of creating one on a boat, Paul? We could set something up.
Definitely.
Don't you think? Come on, let's do it.
David Gilmour's got a studio on a barge on the Thames, so I think we should just set up.
I rest my case.
Can you get the Harrison in there? Is the Harrison going to fit on the? Yep, it's got to be a big boat.
Yeah, it could be a big boat.
We can turn it sideways.
There you go.
No, we had some great times with some rap parties there, Andy.
We did.
Fond memories of that. Too many people packed onto too small of a boat, floating around Toronto Islands.
Exactly. Great memories, Paul. Great memories.
Yeah.
Questions for everybody. How does Paul handle a situation where he's not comfortable with the direction something's going in?
He just walks out.
I can't answer that. He executes, and then he talks about it. He has for a mild-mannered man, he has an incredible amount of experience and confidence, and he knows what he likes, and he knows what works or doesn't work, and he's not timid in saying it. But he's extremely articulate and handles himself with a lot of grace. So he'll do something that he's not fond of, but then he'll turn around and discuss it with the director, and it's amazing how many times he has the last word.
You think the accent helps?
Yes.
It's put on.
100%.
Andy gets away with that too.
I don't know if it works in London, but it works here.
No, it definitely doesn't work in London.
Congratulations on BAFTA.
Oh, thank you. Yes, very exciting to get the nomination.
Yeah.
Both Andy and I. Yeah,
thank you.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I've spoken to the Savoy. You'll have the Sinatra seat. It's sweet. It's all arranged. So.
Oh, nice.
Don't worry about it this time. You got it.
Thank you. Fun times when we were there, Mike.
It certainly was.
Yes.
Congratulations, Paul, and thank you everybody for joining.
Thank you, Carolyn.
And thank you for this surprise. This was wonderful.